deciding who goes in and is this Native American land and its budgets, and he wants to be back out with his dog, his rifle, and his walking stick. He wants to discover and find new things, not sit behind a desk. And so he runs into some trouble. He spends money that he doesn't have. He makes a few bad decisions. And they're saying as great a leader he was on the trail, he was a poor administrator. Things just didn't work out. And he's always at odds with a guy named Frederick Bates, who wanted to be the governor, but gets kicked out of the job because Meriwether Lewis was alive and returned. And Bates will float the story that Lewis was sending Native American leaders eastward in exchange for getting a portion of the money made off of fur trading with them. So in a sense, he was insider trading. When those allegations surface, Meriwether Lewis is temporarily pulled off the job, and he decides that he's going to head westward and clear his name. His debts, things that he paid for, was supposed to be reimbursed with. The government withholds that money. He's like, no. Bates is a jerk. I'm on the up and up. And he decides he's going to go back to Washington. He starts going down the river to New Orleans, but changes his mind in Tennessee and decides that he's going to go overland over the Natchez Trail, which was very dangerous and full of robbers. But once again, I'm Meriwether Lewis. If I made it to the Pacific and back, what is some idiot robber going to do to me? And about 70 miles south of Nashville, he stops at a place called Grinder's Stand, an old inn. With him, he is carrying all of his journals that he wants to publish to generate money. And there's where the owner of Grinder's Stand tells a couple different stories. One, she heard 3 gunshots rang out, and she saw the door of Captain Lewis's room open. She also says she saw Captain Lewis head down the trail. 3 other men followed him. She heard 3 shots rang out, and she saw the captain crawl back into his room. She doesn't go check on him. In the morning, Meriwether Lewis is dead. He was shot 3 times. Some say they were self-inflicted. He shoots himself twice in the chest, but he was such a stout lad, it didn't kill him. So he reloads and shoots a 3rd time, and the bullet goes through his head, but it was the internal wounds that killed him. In any event, the death is ruled a suicide. To this day, there is contention that it was murder, not suicide. They wanted to exhume the body and do forensic tests, but it was not allowed. Stephen Ambrose, the author, says, reading everything, he concludes it was a depression-induced suicide because his name was ruined, he was a hero, and his life was the core of discovery, and now there was, how can you beat that? What's the next challenge? There wasn't one big enough for him. So he is buried there to this day. Trying to speed it up here. Clark, on the other hand, takes off. He's over his earlier academic fears, misspelling Sioux 27 times, and he is given to be the governor of Missouri, and he would not take the job until after Meriwether Lewis was buried. And he was also made superintendent of Indian affairs west of the Mississippi River. A very big job. What I love about Clark is he always remained devoutly loyal to his buddy Lewis. People would say that he committed suicide, not in Clark's presence. He names his first child Meriwether Lewis Clark. So he was a Clark loyalist to the end. Sacagawea will stay in Montana, and Clark will take her son, John Baptiste. He will be raised in Clark's home in St. Louis and educated. John Baptiste will travel around the world. He will go over to Europe, and he will come back and die in Oregon after having contact with a few interesting people. He will be a good friend of legendary frontiersman Jim Bridger, and he will know the actual Hugh Glass, the story of the Revenant that's out right now, as he worked for the Northwest Fur Trading Company as a hunter, explorer, trapper, and businessman. But anyway, back to Clark. Clark turns out to be a very, very, very good administrator. Where Lewis failed in his administrative skills, Clark had it. And his job was very difficult. His job was to assimilate the Jeffersonian ideal of American Indians to becoming like white Americans. And they said he was always able to understand the Indian sense of nationalism and culture while also believing in the Jeffersonian ideal. So his job was to, give land grants, allow settlers in, protect trapping rights, but all the while trying to convert the Native Americans. He's pulled into service in 1812 up on the Canadian border, where again, his military skills come in handy, and he is given, after the war, all the land to govern from Illinois to Louisiana as the final word on Indian affairs. He fights briefly in the Black Hawk Wars in Illinois, where he encounters a young, skinny volunteer named Abraham Lincoln. He says, look, we got other things planned for you, just stay out of the way. All right. And he personally will negotiate 1/10 of every Native American treaty between the United States government and Native American tribes. And as bad as things got, especially under President Andrew Jackson and his Indian Removal Act, all the separate tribes from Canada to Mexico said when they had a problem, the one guy they knew they could trust to shoot them a straight deal was William Clark. Said he never lied about, well, this is what they're going to say, and what they really want to do is remove you from your land. So when push came to shove until his death, when there was a tense moment on the Native American front, William Clark was the guy that not only the Indians, but the government called on to seal the deal. 2001, President Clinton read the book Undaunted Courage, thought it was fascinating. So he trucks Hillary and Chelsea out to Missouri, and in Fort Benton, they hop in the Missouri River, and they go down the Missouri River with author Stephen Ambrose. So enraptured was President Clinton with the story that near Great Falls is still the buffalo jump, where they herded the buffalo off the cliff, and still hanging there is a flag that William Clark gave to the local Blackfeet in the area. It was a sign when westward expansion happened that these were trustable, trade-worthy Indians. President Clinton had the descendant of that chief flown to Washington in a White House ceremony. This is actually a pretty good story. He finally gives William Clark the permanent rank of captain in the United States Army. He was still on the Army Register as a first lieutenant. The story is interesting. The descendant shows up, and the thing is said, wear formal wear. Well, being his name is Larry. Larry's a funny dude. And Larry shows up in his Blackfeet regalia. He shows up to the White House, and they're like, well, who are you? Well, I'm Larry. Larry's huge guy. He's like 6'4", this big guy. And they're like, well, sir, this is a ceremony. He's like, yeah, I know. I got the flag right here. Well, sir, you can't come in dressed like that. It's a formal affair. He's like, oh, I'm dressed formally. Like, what do you want me to do? And there was this hubbub. Stephen Ambrose, the author, is walking by and is like, Larry, where have you been? The president's looking for you, man. And he's like, well, Secret Service Sam here won't let me through. So Larry is finally let in, and he brings the flag, and the flag was there. The Smithsonian cleaned it all up. President Clinton asked Larry if he could put it in the Smithsonian. Larry said, no, it belongs in Montana. So it's out there to this day. And that's it. That's the end of the night for holy cow. What's funny about this is, as I was throwing this together, I go, dear, usually things go about an hour and a half. It's my war stuff. I don't know if I got an hour and a half on this. She started laughing. She's like, yeah, okay. And literally, once again, she was right. It's a bad habit that she has. So anyway, any questions? Yes, sir.
Where did that name come from?
It was, they said it was the sound, believe it or not, the sound of the rain hitting the wood and the water right outside where they were. So that was it. Yes, ma'am.
So you say there's some artifacts, you showed us artifacts at Monticello. Isn't there a museum in Philadelphia that
has a bunch of them.
All on display, all the stuff you sent back?
So they wanted to keep it at Monticello, but they couldn't. And so they sent it up where Dr. Benjamin Rush educated Meriwether Lewis. It's in Philadelphia. Philadelphia, it's kind of an underrated city to visit. There's so much to do there. It's really hard to get it all in. Yes, ma'am.
Why did Chicago's base not stay with her?
That is one of the things. She wanted to go back with her family, and since he was part Indian, part French, she goes, I don't know how well he's going to be received. And Clark was always messing around with him, playing with him. Charbonneau disappears and goes off hunting and trapping, and so they try to communicate with Chicago, but once they pull out of the Mandan camp in June, they never see her again. So neither did Pomp. So kind of not a real good answer, but we don't know if they're going to like him. So do you mind taking him? Nope, let's go. So and he had a pretty interesting life. So anyway, anything else? Yes, sir.
Were each of the men promised 1,600 acres?
The captains were promised 1,600 acres. Everybody else, officers got 1,000. Enlisted men got 800. So that's pretty good. That's pretty good farm for back then. I'll take 800 acres.
York promised the same?
No, York gets his freedom. He gets back. Lewis is like, look, brother, you did, man's work, have that. He stays around Clark, around St. Louis, but he was a free man.
Was he the only slave?
He was the only slave. He was the only slave. Yes, sir.
So they took off from, they actually started in Pittsburgh? Or
Clark gets in the river, jumps in the Ohio, Ohio River, goes down the Monongahela, gets the Ohio River in Pittsburgh, and goes all the way down to St. Louis. Stopped in Marietta, Ohio for a little bit, pushed on, met Clark in Kentucky, and then on to St. Louis. Yeah. So Lewis literally travels about as far as you can in the United States on the water, going from literally East Coast to the Rocky Mountains and then crosses over. So only that 2-week stretch was he not in or near the water from literally 1803 to September of 1806. So, he saw it all. So, anything else? If not, have a great night, folks. Feel free to check out the Bear Claw and stuff while I shut her down. And I hope we see you next Yeah. He gets bounced like 2 He doesn't stop. He goes 2 times.
I'm riding company yesterday.
Oh,
really? Does he do one that, there's one that Ryan's all hot on.
Glad you enjoyed it.
Thank you.
You're very welcome.
It's water.
Who was I telling the other day? I
water.
forget who it was. Who do you know that would walk a low? I said Meredith Dolan.
But anyway, he's excited about that one.
First
I
name
think
that
he
came
thinks
out
yes
of my
because he
mind. Who it was.
That's it, I just looked at top.
Yeah.
What did you, Clinton did. He went through all of this, and he's like, okay, this is really cool.
I think
So
they
it's
try to
not
offer
easy,
that one
but
a lot.
You'll love it. So-
Anyway,
Cool.
see you next
Hey,
week.
doesn't mean you
Next week.
wasn't mean you broke from grinders.
How are you?
I don't know. I don't know. I'll say, I'm gonna agree with you. My mom's like, hee haw.
I read the old boy before.
Yeah.
I read Undone.
Hey, you're doing good. Well, that's a fantastic book. Awesome. It's
I read the Battle of the Bulge.
Hey, these are for you.
These are
From
for
the
me.
World War II stuff.
Oh,
Posters.
okay.
You
Oh,
know,
thank you.
like,
Yes,
You can do what
yes.
you want, you can throw them out, you
Nice
can
to
send
meet
them
you.
to kids, but if you, it's, they're kind of cool.
Hey, some of my material is kind of getting aged out. You gotta.
I still all the posters, but.
Yeah, we did
it's
last-
just
I appreciate
World War II.
it.
No problem.
Thank you so much.
See ya.
See
you
you
next
guys
week.
next week. You got it.
See you guys.
See y'all.
Yeah, just like, you know, it's like,
Hey,
I'm
Jack.
gonna miss a couple,
We
but
will.
it's worth it.
Yeah,
Swing
exactly.
dance, swing dance.
Yeah, hey, thank you, no problem. Yeah, see you. See you guys next week. Very good to meet you, sir.
My pleasure.
You're welcome.
My pleasure. That was a wonderful.
Does your dad come
Appreciate
to
it.
Alton or just in town visiting?
He lives in Hillsborough.
Oh, yeah.